Joining me now, Josh Blackman, an associate professor at the South Texas College of Law and a legal columnist at the National Review. So, Professor, I don't know if you heard my conversation with Andy Biggs, Congressman, but we were talking about courts micromanaging the process of government. Our government is clogged up enough. I think everybody, Democrats and Republicans, would agree with that. But when you put the court in, it gets even more clogged up.
Well, thank you for having me, David. What happened is the Supreme Court told the Trump administration that they could not ask the question. Now, it's legal to ask the question, but Chief Justice Roberts found that the president didn't give a good enough reason. And knowing full well that there wouldn't be enough time, he just released his decision, and that was the end of it. And today, President Trump had to say, we are going to follow the courts, and we can't push this any further.
Well, Professor, specifically, Justice Roberts, Chief Justice Roberts, actually, he didn't applaud, but he said it was perfectly reasonable. In fact, we can put up the quote, perfectly reasonable to put that citizenship question on the census. He said that decision was reasonable and reasonably explained, particularly in light of the long history of the citizenship question on the census. But then he went in and clogged it up to such a point where the administration had no choice. They had to print out the census questionnaire without the question included, even though, by the way, 67% of the American people are in favor of that question being on the census.
I call this the John Roberts roller coaster, where it looks like he's veering to the right, and at the last minute he takes a sharp turn to the left. This reminds me much of the Obamacare case from 2012, where he said, you can't make people buy insurance, but you can tax them for going uninsured. This has been John Roberts' approach on the Supreme Court, and he did it once again with the census case. Well,
then you had today the dramatic announcement that the president believes he's found a way to get around the census question, to get the data that he needs, that we all need, in order to find out who's in our country legally and not. Let me just play a soundbite from the president's announcement in the Rose Garden. Go ahead.
It could determine citizenship for 90% of our population or more. With today's executive order, which eliminates longstanding obstacles to data sharing, we're aiming to count everyone. Ultimately, this will allow us to have an even more complete count of citizens than through asking the single question alone. It will be, we think, far more accurate.
Now, we've already heard from Democrats suggesting that they're going to try to block this. Do they have any legal authority to do that?
I think they're going to have a tough time with this. The Census Department has always had this information at its disposal, but those certain barriers prevent them from using it. And I think what the executive order will do will be to allow the Trump administration to unify the entire government and bring this information forward to give an accurate count of who is and who is not a citizen of the United States on the census.
What about budgeting for this? Is there enough money within these various departments, Homeland Security, Social Security, et cetera, to afford to do this? Because clearly they've already gathered the data. It's just a matter of collecting it. Shouldn't cost too much.
Yeah, I don't think you require any more money. The census question was actually quite expensive because you have to print the forms and send people door to door. This is information already within the government's knowledge, and I think it should be a heck of a lot easier than the census approach.
By the way, there is a short form, short of the 10-year census. There is another report that the Census Bureau does on an annual basis, which goes to 3.5 million households in the United States. Will they be allowed to put that? That was the question. As you can see, this is the question that was on there. This is, again, not the 10-year census. This is the annual census that we're talking about now. And this is the one where President Obama took that question out, and President Trump wants to put it back in. Will that still be a possibility?
Yes, this is called the ACS, the American Community Survey, and this will still ask the citizenship question. That will still go out.
So, in other words, we may have even more information than if it had been put on the 10-year census, based on what the president said today and this other survey.
I think that's right. The census approach was never very accurate because people might choose not to fill it in. But this other approach may actually give more accurate data on a granular block-by-block basis to give some information the government seeks to obtain.
That is very interesting and very hopeful as well. Professor, thank you very much for being here. Josh Blackman, appreciate it.